Emanuel, and I am the Associate Director for Career Education here at San Jose State Career Center. It is my pleasure to join you for our Lunch and Learn today. I will be talking about all my best tips and tricks for interview success. While the title says virtual interviewing, it's going to be tips for both virtual interviewing and in-person interviewing, since we're transitioning back to doing more in-person interviewing. And so I think the new norm is going to be hybrid interview skills. So the ability to meet with people both in person and virtually. We've seen a lot of the initial interviewing now happen still in a virtual situation, and then final interviews happening in person, where people are actually now coming back on site with employers. We are about 30 people, so there's time for some Q&A. I like to go through and have kind of a discussion with all of you and really try to answer the questions that you have most immediately. And we will go ahead and use the chat feature for that. So I'll pop in and check the chat every once in a while. I am joined by my co-host today, which is Lizette, our graduate career counseling intern. She'll be manning the chat for me as well. And Liz, if you see that there's like a bunch of questions or themes popping up, go ahead and let me know so that I can pause. Okay, and here we go. So first thing I want to check in with you all is interviews. Love them or hate them? And if you want to just put in the chat, if any of you have interviewed before, some people that not their favorite thing to do in the world, other people are actually quite comfortable with interviewing. I'm going to check. We got hate them. Some people love them, haven't had many, so haven't had enough to decide yet. Hate, a lot of hates. And for those who hate them, let me just ask, what is it about it that they're like, that's why we're here, because we want to not hate them so much? What are some of the things that it just doesn't jive with you with the interview process? Anxiety, yep, get nervous, it's anxiety provoking, feels like you're on the spot. So one of the hopes that I have today is, after we've gone through some of these tips, that you feel much more comfortable with the interview process and maybe hate them a little bit less. You don't have to love them, but at least maybe feel less anxious and more excited or open to the opportunity to do interviews. So with that, let's just get warmed up with a little bit of a video, and hopefully it all works for you. With I think what a lot of people think interviews can be like. And let me see if I can get it together.
This is how people do it now, Nikki. They have their interviews on the internet.
I like it. I know child.
Okay, here they are. And when I hit this, they'll be able to see us. So come on and get in here close so we can be seen in the webcam. See how small the webcam is? No, get cheek to cheek. Nick, come here, cheek to cheek.
Don't crowd me.
We can see you guys.
Okay, great.
You got us?
Hi, my name is Billy.
Oh, we can hear you fine as well.
Oh, great.
Good.
Billy McMahon.
Nick Campbell.
I'm Benjamin.
Allison, we're going to ask you a few questions that some of our candidates find a little bit odd.
Let's go.
No
weird.
judgment. Shoot.
You're shrunken down to the size of nickels and dropped to the bottom of a blender. What do?
You take her flat on your back like
You
this.
just lay back,
Lay
enjoy
stiff
that
as a board, light
breeze.
as a feather,
Pretend it's a fan.
And let those
Okay,
bad
this
blades
one-
whip all around you like
Good.
this. It's like getting an MRI.
Once this blender's on, it's on forever.
It's on.
Respectfully, I got to disagree. We sold blenders, and even the best model in the world is only going to run maybe 10 or 11 hours. So we're getting out, and when we do, we're better off for it, because whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
It's not so much getting out of the blender, it's what happens next. That's the question.
You've got two nickel-sized men free in the world. Think of the possibilities.
I mean, on top of my head, and I'm just
My
spitballing
head's
here.
swimming.
Sunglass repair? We'd be hell on those little screws.
Maybe stick us in those submarines that they put in people's bodies to fight diseases.
Okay, that's not a real thing, the submarines.
No.
Wait a minute. I thought we were stuck in a blender. Now we're saving lives? What?
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 Let me just recap this for you real quick. We started off in a blender.
Yeah.
Now we're saving lives. What?
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 Wait a minute. We were stuck in a blender.
What a journey.
And now we're saving lives? What?
You guys led us to this. Thank you.
Okay. This cracks me up every time. I don't know if you all have seen this movie before. It's called The Intern. And basically these two are trying to apply to a position at Google, or what they're supposed to be pretend Google, but we all know what they're trying to the real company that they're trying to get into. And this might have been a lot of us in the beginning of COVID when we were all kind of getting comfortable with like the virtual world and trying to like, can you hear me? Is the sound right? Am I in the frame? What does this nonverbal piece look like in video? And I think it's funny that it can, if you don't practice or have an idea of what might be coming ahead of time, you can completely go off on tangents, right? So these two somehow, despite this interview, nailed it and got an invite, but definitely kind of a funny way of looking at how ridiculous interviewing can feel sometimes when we're not prepared. Okay, so the whole point of the interview process is we want to break it down so that you have an understanding of why we even go through this dance and ritual of preparing to present ourselves to an employer, and ideally getting ourselves positioned to be the right candidate, so to speak, for a position, whether it's a full-time job or an internship, is typically what a formal interview scenario looks like. So I want you to just keep in mind that there's two main reasons why we interview. One, I want you to think of it as actually a conversation in which an employer, someone who has an opportunity, a job, a position, is looking for a candidate, yourself, someone who is seeking a specific type of position and looking for what we call like a match, right? And the criteria in which we're trying to decide whether or not the company is a match for you and you're a company and you're a match for the company is really looking at skills, interests, and experiences. The second part is to remember that it is a marketing opportunity. It's a marketing opportunity for both yourself to quote unquote pitch yourself for this position or to this employer, and then also for the employer to make an impression upon you. So one of the things that helped me early on in my professional career feel less intimidated by the interview is if I went back to thinking about the purpose of the interview and that this is a conversation in which both parties are really looking for a match, both in what I'd like to do, but also what the employer is seeking as far as skill set to fulfill a certain need. And that both parties are actually checking each other out, right? So it's not just one-sided, so that you may feel intimidated because you think that the employer is really grilling you to get like, you know, these insights and that you have to prove yourself specifically to the employer, but they also have to sell themselves to you, right? Especially as this market has transitioned quite a lot, where it's been definitely a trend of having not enough talented employees to hire. So more, you know, candidates have some shift in power in which they can definitely negotiate what they want out of those types of positions. So a lot of what we're going to talk about in the first half is preparation. Really, the key to interview success, just like anything else, is practice, practice, practice. But there are a couple areas that we want you to prepare in. And really the research would be, one, what are the key qualifications and skills that the position had asked for or that you had submitted your resume to? What are your success stories? So thinking of maybe 2 or 3 stories that really encompass points of pride for you, or that really highlight your strengths, are going to be important. And the reason that these success stories are important to think about and even write out just so that you really know them well is because they're going to end up giving examples of how you have the skills and qualifications to meet the needs that the employer may have. You don't have to have like 10 success stories, but if you have like 3 really good stories about demonstrating a certain skill set or why you feel like you might have the right characteristics and experiences for a role, you can actually use those stories to answer various interview questions. So you don't necessarily have to fear like they're going to ask me something I can't answer, because you'll know your success stories well enough that most of them will actually answer a lot of questions. Then you're going to have to try to match that, like make it easy for the employer to see how your experiences actually connect with the position that they have open, so that they don't have to do a lot of extra work trying to envision where you might fit within the organization and the role. And then you really want to understand the organization's mission, vision, and I'm going to go a step further and say people or values. And we're going to talk about how you can go about doing that research. Now, I see something popped up in the chat, so I'm gonna check it really quick. Oh, it looks like it's just the check-in form for those of you who've just joined. If you'd like a copy of this recording, we're recording the session. Fill out the check-in form and we can email you the recording. Okay, so now we know that preparation is key and there's some key components that we're gonna research.
Anita, there's a question
Yes, thank you.
about asking for an email to show Dr. Sloan that they attended the event.
Oh, I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
There's a question about asking for an email for proof to show Dr. Sloan that they attended the event.
So if you fill out the check-in form, what I can do is if there is a request for a faculty member, we can actually send them the registration information. So I will share my email at the end of the session, and you can go ahead and let me know which professor is requesting the information. Thanks. Is there any other questions, Liz?
No other questions.
Okay, great. Okay. So what is it that employers are evaluating? And I would just throw this out to all of you in the chat. What do you think employers are actually looking at? Like what do they care about when they're trying to interview you for these positions? Skills and experience. Yep. The right fit. So tell me more about the right fit. What does the right fit mean? If they see themselves working with you, yep. Sangeeta, can you share a little bit more about fit? Maybe just type a few keywords on what you think fit means. Yeah, you guys have it down. Personable and professional in person. Yeah, that's a big one. So I'm gonna talk about fit a little bit more because I think that can be a little challenging. Because fit can sometimes have a negative connotation around also employers maybe potentially discriminating against candidates because they feel they may not fit with their culture. So we'll address a little bit about how to be aware of addressing for fit, but also ensuring that the employer isn't asking you questions that may or may not be appropriate questions that might border on the potential of being discriminated against in the hiring process. Okay, so you all pretty much know what they're looking for. So I'm going to break it down to very simple terms. Can you do the job? And I formerly worked as a recruiter for many years in high tech. I also do a ton of interviews for my role here as an administrator. And I can tell you that the first thing that I'm looking for is a match in the job description. I'm telling you in the job description, the specific skills that I require to do the job. So this one, can you do the job, is really based on competency and skill. Sometimes experience, like if you need a certain level of experience, like, 2 years of experience doing XYZ, like usually when it's management type of role or leadership type of role, having some experience in that role might also come up, but can you do the job is essential. Now, once I know that you have the skills to do the job, your resume looks great, you have those skills, you shared examples of how you have the skill sets that match what I'm looking for. I want to determine your characteristics and your history of work and understand, will you actually do the job? Right, so it's great if I hire you and you have the skills, but are you motivated to do this type of work? Have you exhibited passion about the field or the industry? Are you interested in growth opportunities? So will you do the job? Will you do it, and will you be excited about doing it? Will you be passionate about it? And then how do you connect with our mission and vision? So I have, let's say, the mission and vision of our org is to empower students for success, for career and life success. What does that mean to you? Why is that interesting to you? How in the work that you've done does that connect with your own personal mission and personal values? So those are the three things that are really being assessed for, regardless of what the questions are being asked. So I can guarantee you, whatever question they throw at you, at the end of the day, it's evaluating skill set and experience. Can you do this? Will you do it? Are you excited about it? And then does this connect? Do you connect with the purpose of our organization, what we want to do. Okay. So now, what exactly should you research to determine some of that information so you can prepare for those types of questions? This may seem very simple, but absolutely review that job description again. Because again, that is the menu, the short list of what my order, so to speak, of what I'm wanting to fulfill in this particular job. So really knowing that, and you probably, if you're in the interview process, that means your resume did its job, right? The resume got you the interview, and now they want to meet you in person. So reviewing the job description and then reviewing your resume as well, like really knowing it inside and out, because there's stuff that was on there that really intrigued the hiring manager or the recruiter. The second piece is doing additional research beyond just going to the company website to review the company and the interviewer or interviewers. Who will you be meeting with? Usually they're going to tell you the recruiter or the list of people that you're going to be meeting them. Research them. And the easiest way to do this is on LinkedIn. Okay, we have a whole other workshop on LinkedIn, so we can definitely review some of those questions maybe at the end if there's specifics on how do I find people on LinkedIn. But you can definitely follow companies, look up the recruiter and get to know a little bit about their background. Maybe they might have some similarities and interest. If they're alumni at all, that's always good information for you to have because it helps make connections quite quickly. And then the last one is who actually already works there. Okay, who are these people? So in this example, I'm using Google, right? So I did a quick search for recruiters. Marissa's profile came up. You would already know who your interviewer is going to be that day. People who work there. I'm going to just put it in the chat. How would you find out information about the company from people who already work there? How would you find people who already work at the company you're interviewing at? And I'm just going to pause for a second and look at the chat. And maybe some of you have already done this. Okay, so Devang said he's going to go to the company. I think that's interesting. I actually do recommend going to the company before you interview if you're going to go in person, but just to lurk in the parking lot to see what kinds of, people show up. What are they wearing? What is the vibe of the employees? But I wouldn't actually directly go to the company and just start talking to people. Someone said LinkedIn. Absolutely. You can find people who are already working at that company. And what we would suggest is that you actually try to do informational interviewing with employees before you start the interview process. So actually, when you're starting the kind of job and internship search is also a great time to look at potential alumni or colleagues, peers that might already be working at certain companies or industries that you're interested in. And we call this process informational interviewing. We actually have a guide on our website, and maybe I'll ask Liz to go ahead and drop the direct link to our job and internship guide. On page 5, we actually have a whole list on how to conduct an informational interview. Daphne, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. Join coffee chats and if the company has one. Yeah, so many of these organizations actually come to campus. I don't know if you're aware of this, but we actually host a ton of what we call information sessions with employers. Some of them are in person on campus and some are virtual, and they're all listed in Handshake. So if you're not familiar with Handshake, it's our job and internship database, so to speak, and you can access it through single sign-on on one.sjsu. But it also is our events site. So any employer who's hosting an event, they usually bring their employees to these events, and it's just like a meet and greet. It's pretty informal and more informational. So that is a great way to also meet some of these employees. The last thing I'll say is you actually already have a network that you should start tapping into. And those are your classmates, faculty members, professors, advisors, and us at the Career Center. So you have a team of career counselors who are constantly talking to a lot of these employers and can help you navigate or even find people on LinkedIn to reach out to. And last but not least, I'm going to plug SJSU Squared, which is our mentoring and meetup platform. So we actually have a platform, and I'll have Liz drop a link to SJSU Squared too, if she doesn't mind, that we've already vetted alumni and professionals who said they actually want to connect with SJSU students to talk about anything related to career. How did I get started? What's it like to work at this company? What are the key strengths and skills you need to be successful in XYZ industry? And so that's free and available to all students. And you can use that, you know, as soon as you start your interview process or job search process, if you want to connect with people. Okay, those are my plugs on how to do connections and informational interviewing, but it's a great way to get the inside scoop on what a company is actually like. Thanks, Liz, for connecting with your career counselor. There's a link in that chat as well. Okay, so now you've done some research. You're feeling really good about who you're going to meet. And now it's time to prepare for specific interview questions. I can guarantee you guys already know what these are. So let's just do a quick check-in. I want to see what people put in. What do you think is the most common interview question? Most common interview question. You probably already know what it is. Crickets in the chat. All right, tell me about yourself. How do you see yourself fitting in? Tell me about yourself. Why do you want this job? Why do you like this job? That's a good one. Yep. Describe a struggle you had and how you overcame. Tell me more about yourself. Absolutely. Okay. You guys are on fire. Drum roll, please. Most common questions. This was results from a survey done on recruiters in 2021 on the most common questions that they asked across companies and various industries. Number one, you guys are right. Tell me about yourself. I guarantee you this is going to be a question. Usually it's the first opener question. Tell me a little bit about yourself and why you were interested in this position. Okay. The second one, challenge you had, a conflict you had, how you overcame it. The greatest strengths question. The opposite of that one is the greatest weaknesses question. Tell me about a time. So these are behavioral types of questions where they can understand how you approached a problem in a specific scenario. So tell me about a time that you had to demonstrate leadership. Tell me about a time that you had to deal with a difficult client. Tell me about a time that you, a project did not work according to plan, and what did you learn? Why are you currently leaving your position? I think that if you're in an entry-level role or you're looking for an internship, that won't come up as much. But if you're, you know, more seasoned or you're transitioning from careers, that may come up. Tell me about a time that you made a mistake. And then what type of work environment do you prefer? So these are just some things to think about as far as some data behind what are the most common questions. Also, helpful resource that I just want you to be aware of is we actually list all of these questions in our interview guide. We have an interview guide that basically breaks down the types of interviews, common interview questions, also directly links to how people have answered these questions. So there's a featured page here that you can see on the screen, common interview questions. If you click on the hyperlinks, they'll open up a video on how someone actually answered that question well. And then you go ahead and you can actually draft out some answers, like practice answers that you want to use. So I will also ask, I bet you she already did it. Let me see if that's what's in the chat. How do we get to that? Exactly. So Liz, do you mind putting the direct link to our guide in the chat so everyone has a link, and it's also listed on this page here. So all our resources, if you go to www.sjsu.edu/career center, that's our homepage. There's a top navigation bar, and on the right hand side there's a tab that says resources. All of our guides are under resources. Okay. So let's just start with that most common question, right? Because I think once you develop a story for tell me about yourself, it actually can answer a lot of other questions. So topics that you can include and tell me about yourself. First and foremost, whether you're looking for an internship or it's your first position as a new grad, is that the employer is going to want to know what you've studied, right? So your major, if you're still in school and you're looking for an internship, the year or class level might be helpful. Experience that is relevant to the position. So any courses that you've taken, any projects that you've completed. If you are looking at your first position or an internship and you don't have a lot of work experience, volunteer work also is helpful. It's really interesting. I was having a conversation with a Microsoft recruiting team about maybe a year and a half ago. And they were talking about how a lot of students minimize their volunteer experiences or co-curricular experiences in the interview process, or didn't necessarily feel as confident about those experiences, but that as an organization, they really value philanthropy, helping, using technology to help others, to simplify life. And also they have a big volunteer philanthropy arm of their organization. And so when they're looking at fit, they also look at whether or not people have interests beyond themselves that they're passionate about. And so volunteer projects were actually very meaningful to them as examples during the interview process. A lot of companies have additional types of philanthropic things that they support. So like, you know, Google has their own kind of values and systems as far as like trying to make sure that people want to give back, do volunteer days. So there's other things that you're passionate about that are outside of the realm of work, but that show that you have a dedication to doing good. A lot of employers really value that. So don't minimize your volunteering experiences. If those are things that are, you know, you're proud of and that you'd like to share as part of who you are and how you think that might make you a good fit for an organization. Specific skills to the job, right? That can you do the job? And then I would have an idea of some of your goals, because as an employer, you're hiring a person for a specific role, but you're also looking at longevity and sustainability and potentially growth. So how does this position align with your goals and where you want to go and the type of career you might want to build? Now, the challenge is you have to do this concisely. It says 60 seconds or less. You know, that to me is more of like an elevator pitch. I would say just enough information that the employer has enough to know a little bit about how your skills and experiences relate to this position, and then can ask you more questions about that. So it's to prompt and start that conversation. I'm going to pause for a second and just see if there's any questions around that in the chat. Okay, looks like we're good. So let's just look at an example of what that could look like. Okay. So this student has started this interview process. Maybe it's a new grad and the employer has asked, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Great. I'm a senior at San Jose State University and I'm majoring in business analytics and minoring in psychology. And I really love sifting through data to find patterns in relationships. I then like communicating those findings visually through charts and graphs and infographics. And I'm especially interested in how people learn from visual communication. And that's why I think it'd actually be a great fit for the role of human resources analyst on the training and development team at your organization. And that's exactly why I had applied to the position and am excited to learn more about it. So that is just, again, it didn't talk about like my full life history, right? That's not what Tell Me About Yourself is. It was concise, but it gave me really specific information as an employer right away. So like the major, what it is about data and analysis that this particular candidate loves, so the motivation behind it, and then how that connects to the role in HR that's open related to the development and training team. So it's a really good way for the employer that then pick from these areas as to what question they'd like to ask next. So if it were me as the hiring manager, I'm like, wow, that's really awesome. And that's why we wanted to bring you in for this role. Can you tell me a little bit more about the types of programs that you use to analyze and crunch data. And then now that's asking questions specific to a skill. The other common question that comes up is what they call the weakness question. I'm not so fond of the term weakness because I think really everyone has areas of growth. And I think that you're finding more recruiters and HR organizations moving into growth area versus weakness. But it's basically the same question: what's your greatest weakness, or what's an area for growth? And this one's challenging because it kind of makes people feel like they're on the spot of talking about things that they're not good at. And this is an interview. I want to talk about all the best things about me, not necessarily the things that I'm not great at. So when you're picking an area for growth or quote unquote weakness in this question, think about things that are actually not critical to the job. Okay, so if you are, let's say, applying for an accounting position or a data analyst position, and let's say your weakness is like, I'm not that great at Excel, then I'm going to be concerned because it goes back to that first question. The first thing that I'm hiring for is like, can you do the job? Well, if you're not great at one of the tools that are essential for like getting information and data for this particular position, then I'm going to be concerned. So don't pick a weakness that's critical to the role. Pick something that you're working on that's legitimately a growth area for you, but that you've actually learned from, or that you've taken an active, try to improve, right? So that you've actually worked on this particular skill set. Because what employers know is that we all have areas of growth. The question is like, are you cognizant and aware of the things that you need to work on? And are you self-motivated to actually work on those things? Do you know how to go about improving those skill sets if you need to? And so we call answering those types of questions using the sandwich method, right? So what you want to do is kind of couch the weakness around two pieces of bread, right? So you talk about one positive thing, the thing that you're working on, and then the outcome, okay? So let's look at common mistakes that people say that are probably not going to work for the weakness question. One is denial of weakness. So something that's like, I just don't have any weaknesses, I'm awesome. Okay, that no one believes that, and it just sounds really disingenuous, right? The other one is just picking a weakness that's not really a weakness, right? Like, I just am so overcommitted to my work and my job that I have, I just work long hours and have no problem doing that because I just love what I do. That's another one that I've heard before that it was like, really, is that your weakness? I'm trying to think of one that isn't that great of a weakness. It'll come to me, but usually it's the denial of a weakness that sends up some red flags. We already said, so weaknesses that bring up red flags, like, I don't really like working on schedules. I kind of like managing my own schedule. As long as I get the job done, I don't think that's an issue. I'm results driven. I give results, but I don't necessarily like being on a schedule. So like the 9 to 5 thing might not work for me. That could potentially have some red flags, right? The employer's gonna be like, oh, okay, well, we do have some hours here that are required, and we hope that you show up when you say you're gonna show up. Oh, this is a good one. Yeah, sharing a strength that is posing as a weakness, like I'm a perfectionist. Oh, really? That one, it sounds like it might just be, again, disingenuous. Okay, so those are things that you want to think about when you're doing the common areas of weakness. I'm going to stop and look at the chat because I think there's a couple more things that popped in. I care too much about my job. Well, I want you to care about your job. But if you said something like, my job is number one, and I will be here no matter what, and, I will sacrifice all things for my job, I might be concerned. Like, because that means that you may not have balance. And I want to hire people that are balanced, especially when it relates to working on other teams with other people who are going to be affected by whether or not someone is quote unquote a workaholic. Let me see what else is here. There's some questions, so I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, so common examples of weaknesses that I recommend: time management, organizational skills. I think it has to be true for you. So I will give you one example of mine. I am very much, I'm a career counselor by nature. I love meeting with people and hearing their stories, developing resources, being creative, being innovative, forward thinking, strategic. The thing that I like least in my tasks of to-dos is actually having to, do database management. Okay, and putting in data into a system and ensuring that that we can measure those that data and tell a story with that data. It's not that I don't like data, it's just the process of actually putting things in a spreadsheet that drive me kind of batty. So can I do it? Absolutely. And the way that I've approached it is realizing that I can schedule that particular task in a time that works best for me. So it's probably not the first thing I'm going to do in my day of tasks. I might save it for the end of my day, or on a certain day where I'm feeling really energized from if I have some ability to do, let's say, a class or teach something and then do some appointments, and I'm feeling really energized from those tasks, that I will then go into the task I like least because I have some of that good energy that I can now ride off of. Now, did I say that I can't do Excel? No, I just said it's not my favorite task to do. And here's how I go about organizing my personal schedule or figuring out a way to do that well without necessarily not doing it. I don't know if that makes sense to you all. If organization is a challenge, and I've heard that one before too, and that's true for you, that's great. As long as you tell me that you have a method in place of how you address the organization. So let's look at an example to help round this out. Okay, so what is your biggest weakness? So here's something that a student can say. Early in college, I was on a group project where a friend noted that my feedback for another team member's performance came off too harsh. From this experience, I've learned that different people require different approaches when critical feedback is provided. Since that group project, I completed a LinkedIn learning course on professional communication where I practiced adapting my delivery to a diverse population. The training was so helpful that recently a classmate acknowledged my ability to diffuse and resolve a situation where another student wasn't contributing to our group project. That's a beautiful sandwich, by the way. That's a great example of something that came up as a challenge or weakness, taking the feedback, digesting it, and then looking at a way to improve, doing a LinkedIn learning class. That's a great example of how this person took initiative to work on a particular area of their communication, and then learned that new adaptive skill, used it in a future situation that actually provided a great outcome. So that is a good example of how you can approach the weakness question, and also ways to show how you go about learning and adapting. This is also good for tell me about a mistake you made. We all make mistakes, but here we're looking for integrity. One, that you can acknowledge that you made a mistake, and two, how you resolved it or what you learned from it. Okay, let me check the chat because I think I just saw a question pop in. Oh, good. Okay, I'm glad, Sangeeta, that was a helpful example. Okay, so let's keep going. This is just giving you the very specific languages of what the issue came off too harsh, what I learned, what action I took to improve, and then the outcome. So now we're moving into giving some thought on improper interview questions, illegal interview questions. Technically, there's not an illegal interview question. The illegal part comes if there's discrimination based on someone asking a question or seeking information that's protected. And so it's very important that you remember this. Sometimes interviewers, if you're working with a recruiter or someone from human resources, they're probably less likely to ask some improper questions or for information that's protected. Because they typically trained on this aspect. But if you're meeting with hiring managers, so a lot of times the final interviews are not necessarily with recruiters or a representative from human resources, it's the actual team that you'll be working with and the actual day-to-day supervisor that you'll be working with. So they may very likely not have a background in human resources, communications, or interviewing. Their background is in that discipline that they work in. Maybe it's engineering, maybe it's software design, maybe it's let's say marketing, but they don't necessarily realize that certain questions could be viewed as improper. And so I want you to consider that if you ever get asked a question that may be in these categories, to not think that maybe there's an intention for discrimination there. Like, I would give people the benefit of the doubt, but also know how you can manage it if you're uncomfortable with some of the questions. So any questions that ask about like marital status, family status, religion and creed, national origin, gender, salary history, that is California law. So you don't have to disclose your salary history, disability, race, age, or medical conditions. So if someone even says like, oh, they're trying to make small talk with you, and they're like, oh, do you live locally, or where did you go to high school? Did you grow up around here? That might be benign, but that could probably lead into like, oh, are you let's say a U.S. citizen? Are you a non-U.S. citizen? Are you an immigrant, a non-immigrant? So like things like that, when people are trying to break the ice, is usually when something like this might come up. For the most part, if you get a question around some of those, like, where are you from originally? Are your accents interesting? What country were you originally born in or from? You can feel free to answer the question if you think that the person is just not aware that the question they're asking could be considered inappropriate or getting into information that might not necessarily be relevant to the job, or that could be considered means for discrimination down the line. Or if you're not comfortable answering the question, you can refuse to answer the question, but you can do it in a nice way that doesn't necessarily position the person as like calling them out, saying that's an illegal question and I'm going to report you to HR, because they may not realize that, but you want to make sure that the communication is still professional while allowing you to pivot the conversation to something that's more job related. So you can simply state, oh, I'm uncertain of how that particular question might relate to this job and the skills that I have related to this job. I'd love to kind of refocus on learning more about what you're looking for in the position and maybe discussing my qualifications as that relates to the position. What this does is it actually gives the other person an opportunity to take a step back and realize, oh, maybe the question I asked was inappropriate. And they might say like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean, you're right, let's get back to the job. Or if this person is really acting out of malice or like, from a discriminatory lens, they realize that that that's not okay. And so if they continue to go down that route, you can either decide to end the interview or be sure to follow up with human resources or your recruiter to state that there were inappropriate questions that were asked. Okay, I'm going to pause there just for a second because I think I saw two. How do you answer, are you doing other interviews with other companies as well? I think that is actually expected. So if you're interviewing with me, that means you're an active candidate. Yeah, you're probably interviewing with other companies as well. So if an employer were to ask me, are you also interviewing with some other organizations right now? I would say, yeah, I am actually, and I'm in an active job search process at the moment, and definitely excited to explore the different opportunities. I am in interview talks with one or two other organizations, but this is the position that I am most excited about, and I would really love to become a member of this team, and here's why. And if you don't want to disclose that you're in interviews with other companies for whatever reason, you can just say, I'm actually in an active job search, but I'm really excited about this particular role, and just bring it back to, I'm here with you because I'm excited about this role. You do not have to disclose who else you're interviewing with. You do not have to disclose the other companies that you've applied to, especially in a first interview situation. And also, this probably that first interview that you have in person, it is likely not the time that you usually talk about salary negotiation. Usually there's some sort of offer that comes in before you actually start talking salary, or offers or positions. You can ask if someone says like, so what's that salary are you expecting for this? You can simply just throw it back at the interviewer and say, oh, well, I would really be interested to hear, now that you've heard about my skills and qualifications, what you think a fair range would be for this position. So really and at this point in time, they have more and more companies are disclosing those salaries. You should also research that before you go into the interview process. And Glassdoor is actually a great site to see reviews, employee reviews of different organizations, but also looking at some salary averages to give you some insight on that. Okay. Moving along. So some tips for success when you're actually on the day of the interview. So in-person interviewing, make sure that you arrive at least 10 to 15 minutes early. I would always give myself extra time to get to the location because you just never know. There's traffic. If you're driving and you have coffee and it spills on you, I mean, like there's all sorts of random things that could happen. So give yourself plenty of time, especially if you're probably going to be a little bit anxious and nervous at this time anyway. So give yourself extra time to get there. Be respectful to all employees. Okay, so the minute that you walk into the office, the interview's on. It does not start when you meet that first person. Everyone that you interact with, from the administrative person that you check in with to the people you actually talk to, are all part of that interview process, and likely will be asked information and feedback about you in the process. So be respectful to everyone. I would say bring extra resumes. I think this is still true in this day and age, printed out resumes, because sometimes you end up meeting with other people that may not have been on your agenda or your list. And if you have one ready to go, or they ask for one, you have one to give out. Virtual interviews, same thing. Arrive 10 to 15 minutes early, but to make sure you're set up your virtual studio. Make sure that like the video is working appropriately, that you can see how you're dressed, at least from like your waist up, that you're looking professional, that the equipment is working, that you have the right link for the Zoom or for whatever platform they're using. And then try to keep your eyes on the camera, which is, I think, sometimes challenging because it's like this little itty bitty screen right there. But if you continually look at the camera when you're talking, it looks like you're looking directly at the person. So it really does mimic that direct eye contact and helps with some of that nonverbal communication. And then for all interviews, whether it's in person or virtual, dress and groom professionally. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. Be mindful of nonverbal cues. I think one of the hardest things is when you ask a question or you give an answer and there's no response. This happens a lot in panel or group interviews. Sometimes also in formal, like academic or government settings where there has to be a pre-approved list of questions that the panel has to ask every candidate in the same exact way. And they usually cannot ask follow-up questions because those have not been pre-approved. And so you may say something and everyone's writing down the answer and then they'll like just stop and look at you. And so you don't necessarily always know, did I give enough information, not enough information? So keep in mind that in some situations, the nonverbal cues are really important to let you know if you can continue talking or if someone understood. And that again is usually eye contact or nodding. If you yourself are wanting to take some notes during the process, be sure to just share that and ask before you start taking the notes, whether it's in person or in virtual, like, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited for our time. Is it okay if I take some notes during the interview process just to make sure I get all the questions and jot down some ideas? And usually every interviewer that I've ever met, present company included, has always said, oh yeah, that's fine, right? Because we understand there can be a lot of ideas or maybe several questions that might be hard to navigate. And then practice those common interview questions that we talked about and shared with the guide earlier. And then always send a follow-up thank you email. I can't tell you how many times I've interviewed someone and have not received that, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then when I do receive it, it does make a difference. Like, wow, that person took the time to say thank you, or here's what we talked about, and here's why I'm so excited about this position. As a reminder, I believe my experiences doing XYZ would directly benefit your organization in this role. It reminds me of what your strengths and skills are, and it shows just a care and passion for the role, and also just general etiquette. Okay, I'm going to pause one more time because I see some stuff in the chat, and I'm also looking at time. So Lizette, can you just shout out if there's some common questions there that need to be addressed?
Just I'll ask, will this recording be posted on the career website for reference? I included the YouTube channel if they want to check it out there. And then someone mentioned that how do you handle stress is a question that they always get stuck on.
Oh, that is a good question. I would love to know what answers might have been given before, but I think stress is normal, happens in every job. And it's really important for you to know like your own self-management. So when people say like, how do you handle stress or how do you handle challenges? You should always have a good idea of what works best for you. So I would definitely think about that if it's a common question that you get stumped on, but also realize that there has to be some healthy ways of dealing with stress. So when I get that question, for me, it's very good to take walks. So if there's an opportunity for me to even take a 5-minute walk, that helps with my stress management. I'm really interested in organizations, and you can even bring this up. And one of the reasons that I'm really excited about the organization as a whole, not just the position, is that I noticed on your website that you really value wellness and health. And that in addition to, amazing benefits, that there's a walking group, there's like a healthy eating club. Those are all things that I would love to also support, but be a part of, because I think that a healthy workforce and people who are actually working together to help manage some of those stresses leads to just a better productive day and also happier employees, right? So be honest about your stresses. I think people know everyone gets stressed at some point, but it's just like the weakness question where you have to talk about how you're addressing it or what you found works well for you. Now, I would not say that like the only way that I deal with stress is that like I need, daily midday massages and I got to do happy hour every day after work. That might be one of those red flag things, but I would say within reason, make sure that you talk about the fact that you do have some ways of understanding how to take good care of yourself in stressful situations. Also could be a red flag for you. Remember that the interview is a two-way street. So if stress comes up a lot during the interview, or someone says like, well, we're super busy shop, like we're really busy all the time, high stress, really intense, like clients and deadlines. Like, can you handle that? One thing may be just to make sure that you maybe can multitask, or you know how to organize your own life, or that you're very good with like managing multiple expectations. But on the other hand, if one of your values is to be in a situation that also promotes, wellness and some ability to not necessarily always be in a really intense situation, that might be good feedback for you that maybe this organization is not the right environment for me, because everyone I talk to, one, seems really frazzled and stressed, and two, like that's one thing that they keep talking about. I might also ask like, oh, well, tell me more about how the team and how you support like some of the stress management within the organization, or when you see that there's a lot of deadlines, how does the department or organization support team members to ensure that they are able to navigate that well? Okay, first impressions. I'm going to show you some images here. Some of these are in person, some of these are virtual. And if you can just throw in the chat what you think some of the non-verbals or some of the issues are with these first impressions. So let's start with A. Any ideas as to like if you were in the employer's shoes and you were meeting the candidate, what some of your first impressions might be of candidate A. And you can just put it in the chat. Liz, I'm gonna have you call these out so that I am able to finish this out in time.
Yep, someone mentioned posture, not having eye contact, avoiding eye contact, being present, being aware. And we have one that says, looks okay, maybe a little submissive.
Yeah, I mean, I think she looks professional. And I think in this scenario with the head down and like she looks just a little bit uncomfortable or not confident. So posture and eye contact go a long way. Okay, how about B?
Someone mentioned being nervousness.
Yeah, this is definitely a sign of nervousness. A lot of times we don't know our own nonverbals. And so one thing that is really helpful is if you can either do a mock interview, which is just a practice interview, and someone can give you direct feedback on your nonverbals. Like, for example, did you know that you actually tap your foot a lot, or you shake your foot while you talk or when you're nervous? And someone would be like, I had no idea I was doing that. Yeah, or did you know you actually tap your finger on the desk, or like you put your hands on your mouth? And sometimes it's subconscious, we're not aware of it. So doing a mock interview is one great way to practice some of this and be aware of some of the nonverbals. And we do mock interviews. You can make appointments with your career counselor, or we have an amazing online tool called Big Interview. And I'll ask Liz to pop the link to Big Interview in the chat. It's so cool. You can actually pick the type of interview, the types of questions, the level of difficulty, the industry, and the type of interviewer. And it is basically like an AI system, which will then bring up the interviewer on the screen, and they will ask you questions, and then you have to record your answers. And then you can actually see what you said and how you said it and any of those nonverbals. You can also send those recordings to your faculty members, to your advisors, to your colleagues, your mentor, your career counselor, and they can watch and give you feedback as well. Okay, C is lighting, the importance of lighting. And then D, this person, they might be concentrating, but they actually look confused. And so that also is a concern when employers are not sure if you're actually confident of yourself or if you're not understanding. Okay. Here's some good examples of strong first impressions. These are virtual examples. And then in person. We talked about professional dress. I think business casual is fairly the norm. There are some industries in which, you know, more formal professional dress is expected. So things like banking, finance, higher level administration roles, you know, people still wear suits. So it is important to either talk to others that work there or go with at least one level up more formal than what you would expect the employees that are there are wearing. So if you went to Google, for example, in a full business suit, that might be a little bit much because it's a much more casual environment. So like khakis and a nice button-up shirt might be fine. If you're applying for a position at a more conservative type of organization or more formal organization, then, you know, considering something that like the image on the very left with like a jacket and a white blouse and a skirt or pant might work. So definitely knowing kind of the type of organization is helpful, but I would never, I mean, very rarely would I recommend that you just go in jeans and a t-shirt, right? So that's not a common situation. I have seen jeans done well professionally, especially for more like, let's say like fashion or retail forward type of organizations where it's like a really nice darker denim with, you know, nice shoes, right? Not scuffed, not sneakers. And then like maybe a blazer or a really nice blouse. But that is kind of more in the casual side and kind of more niche into like retail fashion maybe also like service industry areas. Okay, Liz, anything in the chat?
Just questions about getting the recording after.
Okay, great. And then the last area that I wanted to cover is make sure you have questions ready for the employer. And so these are just some sample questions that you can ask. If you're at the end of the interview and the employer says, do you have any questions for me? And you're like, nope, I'm good. That is concerning. Like, we always want to know that during the discussion that we've had, that something's piqued your interest or that you have a follow-up question, because that just shows interest, but also passion for the process and for the organization and for the job. So this is actually a page in our guide, but some samples of what you can ask, you know, what type of professional development opportunities do you offer? Can you tell me about the training and supervision I might be receiving during my first year? What are the growth opportunities within the organization? Can you describe some of the projects and assignments that I might be working on? What are your department and company goals for the upcoming year? What are the biggest challenges that you think new hires face? It can say in the first year or first 6 months, but those are really good questions to ask. And then last but not least, I know we're at time, so I appreciate you hanging in here, but I do want to just remind you that before leaving, make sure that you reiterate your interest in the job, ask about next steps and who your contact should be to follow up. Thank everyone and make eye contact. I know we're in a weird transition phase with COVID, but I think that I've seen a lot more employers expecting shaking hands again. If you're not comfortable with that, that's totally fine. You can say, oh, I'm still in the process of transitioning through COVID. So are you okay with an elbow or, a little fist pump there? And that's pretty common. I think there's been kind of like this awkward phase of like, what is considered professional etiquette now? But if you are comfortable with it, I think at the very least, eye contact and just like a nod, like it was so nice to meet you, is fine. And then if someone extends their hand and you're comfortable shaking hands is great. If not, you can politely just say, oh, thank you so much. I hope you're okay with a nod or an elbow. I'm still not comfortable with shaking hands yet, post-COVID. Within 12 to 24 hours, make sure you reflect on what went well, what you would change, and where you got stuck, because you can then prepare and work on that for the next interview. And then within 1 to 2 days, make sure you send that thank you note. So it's usually email thank yous. Sending requests on LinkedIn to connect is also really good, as long as it includes a brief message as to like how you guys connected or what it was about the interview process that was really intriguing to you and how you look forward to staying connected. Okay, so next steps for all of you is to check out that interview guide. It is in the recording, and I'll also ask Liz to just pop it in the chat one more time. Make sure you practice your interview skills on Big Interview. And then if you want to schedule a mock interview with a career counselor, you can go to Spartan Connect and then make an appointment with any of the career counselors that are listed. And mock interview is one of the options. And then would love, first of all, thank you for sharing your lunch hour with me. I hope that you now feel at least a little more comfortable with interviewing, and it's not so much hate them, but love them as far as how you feel about interviews. If you'd like to enter in a raffle to win a $20 Amazon gift card, please fill out our survey. It's really important for us to know, one, if the topics are helpful for you, if there are other topics you'd like us to cover or develop a workshop on. And if there are things that, can be improved, we always want to hear that too. So if you fill out that form, that survey, you get entered into a drawing to win a $20 Amazon card. And at that, we are at time. So I will just pause for any questions that might still be pending. Liz, any questions that you see?
Nope, just thank you for a great session.
Oh, okay. What makes a unique question? That's a good question. So what makes a unique question? I think it actually depends on what you covered with the employer. and what came up in the actual discussion, because a lot of the follow-up questions usually come from, can you tell me more about, we talked about this one project, can you tell me more about XYZ? The other thing that I really like is when people ask me as the hiring manager, you know, I noticed that, you know, I looked at your LinkedIn profile and I noticed that you've been at this organization for a while. What is it that, you know, has kept you here? What is it that you're excited about the work that you're doing? And you know, what makes this, you know, a great place for you as an employee? Because one, it makes me feel good that the person actually took time to research who they were meeting with, but two, that they care enough about what a current employee thinks is great about the organization. Two, employees will usually glom onto that and say, oh, here's what I really love about, you know, working here. Or here's one of the things that drew me to this position. Or they may react with like, oh, yeah, well, yeah, it's a great place to be. But if it's not, you can tell right away if it's genuine or not. And if someone is not genuine about like thinking it's a great place to work, that to me has always been a good indicator that something to think about, right? Like maybe there's something deeper going on in the organization that I should be aware of. And so that's a really good follow-up question for fit and culture, is what, you know, asking the hiring manager, what is it about this role that you really love, or this team or this org that really, you know, gets you excited? Okay, and with that, we are done. I will stop sharing and I will stop recording. And thank you all for joining us.